Alright, welcome back guys. So we're going to be doing a bit of a recap of the trades that we sort of set up for in our analysis last week. As usual, I'll just pop the link to those previous analysis just up in the corner over here if you want to go look back, sort of see where our mentality was sort of coming into this trading week. But to start us off, we'll have a look at the euro dollar. So this trade actually worked out perfectly. So we were calling this inverted head and shoulders pattern. Unfortunately, I was sort of talking about looking for this sort of tag of the 61 fib line for an entry, but I did say the points of note were the 50% as well, because obviously it had sort of seen a little bit of resistance here coming back for a new sort of support. So got there and had just a beautiful reaction, and as you see, once it sort of reacted off that 50% line, it never really came back. Obviously sort of the second part of the week and that it sort of moved back up, and now it's doing almost a similar sort of thing to what we saw previously with that sort of little ranging. But the main thing to sort of note with this at the moment is that it's out of this falling through this falling resistance, and it's starting to sort of shore itself up for a bit of a new channel. So you can sort of see where it was trying to come up on a bit of a steeper sort of angle around sort of like this sort of direction at first. Again, I don't like these sort of really steep ascents. I don't think that sort of they're sustainable. So they're good for those flare-ups, those breakouts kind of thing, but really after you see these really sort of sharp sort of dramatic moves, you're going to need to do this bit of sort of consolidation pattern, get it back on a bit more of a sustainable angle, and coming up at a better gradient. So what we can do is just sort of delete these ones for now because they don't really seem to be too relevant. So it does look like it's sort of trying to come up with a new channel at the moment. Actually had quite a strong close on the Friday session, which is good to see and quite positive. Really reacting off this zone down here. So I think the sort of next point of call, again, it's sort of like you want to be seeing that there's more some higher highs to sort of really confirm the strength of this move, and then we can sort of start to sort of be gearing up a little bit more. But you can see this move already. It's come up, it's tagged the 23, come back down, it's come back, it's tagged the 38. A lot of these moves, they love the 61. So I mean, ideally that's where you want to be driving it for. Of course, you've got to look at a couple of these other horizontals along the way. I mean, I haven't actually got this one marked out here, but you can see here that this has obviously been a fairly strong sort of level of support previously as well. So once we sort of push through this zone here, which was this support previously, then we can be sort of looking into, you know, around this sort of 50 tag line, the 1.17 range, and sort of really sort of see how price reacts from there. But we did say last week there was a bit of a sort of change in sentiment in the market, and it's definitely nice to sort of see that that stuff's sort of playing out at the moment. Moving on, we had the Gbp Jpy Pair. Now this one I didn't really sort of play perfectly. It was fine, like, you know, I was happy to sort of miss the run if it sort of kept going, because after you've had these big strong moves to the upside, you know, it becomes more difficult and more risky to trade. Do you fade it? Do you try and sort of catch the move back down? Do you try and jump on and hope that it keeps powering through? So we did get a little bit of that early sell-off, but again, I think we were waiting right sort of down around this sort of 155 mark, so right off the mark there for the moment. But that's fine. I mean, you just wait for the chart to sort of really sort of shape up, and then you sort of look for your entries. So you're starting to see a little bit of a head and shoulders pattern sort of forming here. So if we sort of have a look at these ones, perfectly drawn one, but you get the point. You've got the sort of this, you know, there's starting to put in a lower high, and really you could sort of almost drag this across here and say, look, there's pretty much a neckline. So you're starting to see this sort of like top formation of the sort of the head and shoulders, and it's really coming down. One point that we did mention last week was that a possible point of entry, if you were trying to get long on these things, was a retest of those previous highs. And if we drag this one right back, that's right in line, whether it's coming up here. It's got the confluence of the 23 fib as well. So, you know, that's why you've sort of seen price halt around here, because there's so many people in the market, and so many people are analyzing these things every which way. You know, there's going to be people that go, yeah, look, for me, that's a good point of entry. One other sort of point that you could look for is for the measured move play out. So this is, to me, is looking pretty good for a sort of head and shoulders. So if we want to sort of see a possible entry for this, we'd be looking at the full extent of the move will be the distance from the neckline to the top of the head, and then we'll drag that and then sort of copy that move down from the bottom of the neckline. And as I sort of mentioned last week, there's this tiny little range in here, which seems to almost sort of line up with where that measured move would be sort of playing out from. So this is the point that actually I mentioned last time, around that 155 I'd be still looking to get long, because I think this was actually a pullback on a daily. So you've got a little wick here and then it exploded up north. I think this is a great place where people will be liking to put their stops. And, you know, if you want to get long on this thing, you've obviously got some other points of resistance in that previously as well. So price will be coming back down here. You just got to be careful with these things, because if you're catching a falling knife, you know, it can be dangerous kind of thing. And, you know, I'll get to it in a bit, but I have seen a lot of strength sort of been coming back with the JPY pairs at the moment. So I'd be watching and waiting. I wouldn't be sort of jumping in too quickly, but, you know, these are points of interest that you can look for entries for longs. And obviously just wait for the bottom formation to come in. And if you see that confirmation coming back up, well, that's your entry, and that's your chance to sort of get long on these ones. And the final one that we actually reviewed last week was the Aussie Dollar. This one charted out perfectly, actually, to tell you the truth. Like we were saying, there was going to be some early strength with the USD coming into last week. And you can see this sell-off here. It came right through and it played out almost perfectly. We got that sell down there, came back here, actually tagged buy zone, which we sort of put around that fib line. At the time, I think that was sort of moving up, and that I think this green zone was marked out as the 23 fib. Obviously, I've changed it now because, you know, we've gone into another leg up, so just trying to find some entries and possible points of reaction for this one as well. But yeah, no, this is charted beautifully in that. I mean, it's just been on such a rip. I mean, if you look at this move, it's just been so strong. So you're starting to see a little bit of a weakening. It's put in a lower high here. So I think we're starting to see a bit more of a corrective phase. But again, this sort of level, Aussie Dollar loves the 60s. I've found this on every cent around this zone. If you go back through the charts and you have a look at sort of like where it sort of always finds a bit of resistance and also support, is always around that 60 zone. It takes a little while to go through it either way. And you can see here as well, it had this nice reaction where it sort of came back up. This move here, actually, if we delete that one, if we have a look at this one, this was what I was trading sort of through, I think this was Friday session. Caught some longs just down the bottom here for this big swing back up, and you can see, and this is what I was mentioning before as well, they love this 61 fib line. Comes right down, this dramatic sell off, finds its support, and then sort of comes back up, clips that 61, and then absolutely just falls apart again. So, you know, these are the things to look out for in that. I mean, each pair will have its own little kinks and its own little sort of nuances. But, you know, if you can find these things, then you can sort of trade those. And you can look for those entries around those points and those points of reaction that you've seen previously. So moving forward on this week, a couple of things that I've been noticing is a bit of a sort of bottoming formation on a couple of the Euro crosses. Euro has just been so weak last couple of weeks. I think the energy crisis plus a couple of other issues and that sort of going on behind the scenes has really sort of led to its weakness. I mean, the interest rates are just, and the central bank over there just don't really seem to be doing anything in favour of sort of strengthening the euro. But even on these big strong moves, like I've sort of been showing with the JPY pairs, they don't last forever. And, you know, I mean, you could see a continuation of these euro pairs and they could sort of depreciate even further. But you're going to get these correction phases throughout the larger move. So obviously you can see this little 4-hour pushed up here and then continued and came back down again. So each time that's what you're looking at. You're looking at price to come down, find a support. It's going to push back up till it finds a resistance, and then it's going to push down again. And this second push down is really sort of where you're determining where the strength of the move is. Obviously the sellers have had that first move down. Buyers come in, sellers have their second go. Their second go, they overcame the buyers, and they pushed through that support, and on we go. Down here, we've found support, we push up, we find resistance, sellers second go, they come down here. So you're just seeing the same sort of thing on this larger pattern, and this is what makes me think that we're seeing a little bit of a weakening of the bears at the moment on the euro, is that you've seen it make support, it's come up resistance, and it's come here and it's booked in a higher low. So these are the sort of early indicators, sort of higher lows, and obviously if you're going in the other direction, lower highs, is a sort of early sign of sort of change in trend and a change in direction. Because the sellers haven't been able to sort of really match what they had done previously. Buyers are going, look, I value it at this point, so we're ready to try and push it back up. Confirmation of these kind of things is then after you've got your sort of higher low, then you put in a higher high. And now you're starting to see a bit of a push back up. So, I mean, if we sort of have a look at this one here and try to sort of drag out where we see the sort of the price action maybe sort of heading. So we look for a bit of a channel, and you start to see these things. Okay, this is looking pretty good of sort of how it's sort of lining up. So, you know, we've got the high low, we've got the higher high. So we're starting to move in this sort of corrective pattern here. Again, you could see this thing just sort of break out the top side here and sort of shoot up here. Obviously, this sort of previous support zone would be a point of interest that we'd be wanting to keep an eye on. But at the moment, you know, a healthy move on a channel like this, it's a decent gradient. You'd be looking for it to sort of come back down here, possibly even sort of test this bottom rising trend line at some stage. And then that's where I'd be trying to sort of get long on this. I wouldn't necessarily be buying it quite yet. I mean, you could sort of, if you zoomed in on this one here, you could probably find yourself, yeah, a sort of bit of a little range sort of forming through here. So if you did want to sort of, you know, depending what time frames you trade, you can see a little bit of a sort of lower time frame range coming through here. So you can buy the break out of that. And definitely, look, there'd be some trades available in that area. But if you're looking for something a little bit more sort of like, you know, sustainable, because those breaks there, you know, it's a lower time frame, so they're not as strong as the higher time frame moves, obviously. So if we have a look and just sort of say where we'd be going, as I said, I'd be looking to sort of come back down around this zone here. So this would be sort of obviously a little bit more of a sort of risk on sort of feeling with it all. We are seeing price is a little bit overbought at the moment, so be looking to sort of come back down here, maybe around the sort of, yeah, the 1.623 sort of line, this sort of previous support zone down here. If we could sort of maybe catch some longs off this direction here, and then sort of be aiming to sort of push up around here. But I would definitely say that the euros are in a bit of a sort of corrective sort of pattern at the moment. It's just sort of how high it goes, you can't really sort of say. But these sort of things, if it's coming out, if you have a look on the daily, you know, it's the same sort of pattern. Sellers coming down, buyers pushing up. It doesn't matter what time frame it is on, it's going to be the same price action constantly and repeatedly. So you've found support, you're pushing up till you find resistance, and then when they find resistance, they're going to try and drive it back down here, and this is going to be your higher time frame, your daily sort of really determine whether we've seen the sort of bottoming in euros at the moment, or if we're in for another leg and price just continues to sort of just come up here, find resistance, come down, test those lows, and then go down even further. So at the moment, I would still be looking for some short-term strength in the euro. As I said, sort of if you get in on the 4 hour, you can sort of really see where price has sort of found support previously. It's never come back and really tested the underside of this. So this is where I'd be sort of gaming for. So the 1.6364 resistance zone, and I mean Euro New Zealand dollar is a great pair to trade because it can really move quite quickly, but you've just got to be on the right side of it. That's about the only euro trade. Obviously the euro dollar as well, I'd be looking for some positions there, but just a quick sort of recap. If we've got a couple of these other pairs, you're seeing the same similar sort of thing. It's really pushing off the lows, so it's found this support zone through here where it's been tested a number of times. It's a bit of a range kind of here. These grey ones are the higher time frame sort of points of resistance and that I've sort of found before. So, I mean, if you can sort of get on top of here, you could be looking for some longs. Euro GBP is not really a pair that I trade, but certainly it's looking like it's putting in a bit of a bottoming pattern. So we'd be looking to sort of get long on some euros, come up to find some resistance. It wouldn't be a long-term hold at this stage, certainly sort of in and out, and sort of really assess where the strength's at. These things don't turn around in one go, so you're going to see it come up, find resistance, and then come back down, and then we'll sort of play it by there. But I mean, same sort of thing. Euro CAD, we're having a look at this one as well. We got a long position on this one. You're starting to see again this sort of bit of a bottoming, a very choppy bottom down here. But and you can see it's tried to go up a couple of times, but we're seeing this sort of short-term sort of falling resistance that price is sort of pushing through onto this top side. It's trying to form some sort of channel through here, but these sort of things really, this whole area here, it's pretty difficult to sort of really sort of find a good place to trade these ones, just because it's, you know, there's so many sort of ups and downs and choppy sort of parts for it all. Really what you want to do with something like this is not try and pick the bottom. I mean, there's no prizes for picking the bottom. Yes, there's a couple of extra pips in it for you, but, you know, why not wait till you break this strong sort of top side point here of this little sort of congestion zone. If we sort of drag this down here, that pretty much call that your range. Obviously, it sort of stopped midway here, but if you can trade and get on the top side of this sort of resistance zone, this would be your trade for it all. Up here, come back here to retest it, and then on its way you could look for the 23 fib. Anything underneath the 38 really is still in a sort of downward momentum. So, you know, it's not too hard to sort of see that, you know, there's definitely a worthwhile trade in this area. I mean, you're looking at still another 170 points to the top side, just to the 38, and that could still be a corrective pattern. If you're looking at this in a sort of on a daily time frame, it's come down here. It's very choppy, this pair actually, but it's found its support, and that's a big rocket of a candle to be moving up. So you've got room to move on the RSI. I mean, obviously with this cross against the sort of Canadian dollar, you've got the oil factor as well, because obviously sort of Canadian dollar sort of takes and derives its strength from price of oil. So while oil's still moving up, it's going to make it more difficult for this pair. But just another example of how I'm sort of seeing a bit of euro strength coming back into the market this week. And just sort of flipping back to these JPY pairs that I was mentioning before. Obviously this one here, the pound against the yen, you're starting to see this top formation. And so what I will look for is I'll look for a couple of pairs to sort of see if the strength is just isolated to one cross, or if it's, you know, sort of visible throughout a bunch of different pairs. But if you sort of flip onto a couple of these other JPY pairs, so we're seeing the same sort of similar thing with the euro here. So you're getting this sort of again, this sort of almost sort of head and shoulders kind of formation sort of coming through here. So we're seeing these are very strong sort of top signals. As I've sort of mentioned previously, I like the head and shoulder reversals. I think they're a very high hit ratio sort of setup. So if we're sort of seeing this here, it's made its sort of little support. You could almost call this a little bit high here, depending, you know, if you like to sort of include the wicks or not. But you've got your neckline, it's broken through, it's coming up to retest here. I would expect to see a little bit more of a drop down to the downside. Again, sort of if we grab our fibs out, we have a look at sort of how that all sort of lines up with it all. These are sort of smaller points of resistance, but I would say like this little area here where it's sort of congested and sort of tightened up a little bit, that's looking pretty good as it's lining up with the 50 there. So as I said, euro I did say would have a little bit of a strength coming in this week, so I wouldn't be necessarily looking to trade this pair. I'd be looking for something a little bit weaker against the yen, because obviously if they're both dragging in strength, you're not going to see a great deal of sort of volatility. But you know, that's just one sort of example of it all. We saw the GBP pair with it, where we haven't look at CAD, same similar thing. You're seeing this sort of rolling over kind of sort of setup with it all. So I mean, if you wanted to be trading, this is one of my sort of favorite pairs, but I mean, just like anything, it's just absolutely gone crazy the last couple of weeks. And all these pairs, they need to have a little bit of a breather. Even if it's going to keep on moving, it needs that corrective phase where people are taking profit, people are sort of trying to get their short positions on, and they're trying to sort of fade it and sell it back down. And yeah, I mean, like, it really comes down to your own individual style. I don't have a great sort of track record with fading trades, but I mean, the thing is, it doesn't need to be a fade necessarily picking the very absolute top. If you zone in on these things, you find the lower time frames, you find the zones, you find the sort of points of confirmation. Basically, you're just trading a break and retest in the other direction. I mean, if you really sort of need to do it, you invert the scale. I mean, the trade's still exactly the same, but you can find these sort of points and you can go, okay, well, you know, here was a point. You know, as I said, sort of come down here. It's found resistance. Well, I mean, support when the chart's around this way here, but, you know, support and resistance are the same thing, so it doesn't really matter. But, yeah, it's found a point where it wanted to react down here. It's come up, it's found its resistance / support, depending which way you're trading this thing. And then if you sort of put in there, you can see a little zone in here as well. It's come up here, it's found resistance, found support, and it's tested again, and it's pushed through. So I'll just flip this back around so we can talk about it properly. But you can see sellers came in, they found resistance with the buyers, they've pushed back up, they've tested the underside of this previous support zone, they've had a second go. The second go was enough to push it to a new low, so we get a continuation of that sort of price action. So where we'll be looking for these sort of things now is then a sort of push down till it finds support, comes back up, it'll test for resistance, see if that's enough, and then that'll be the test where it sort of comes back to retest those lows. If we go through those lows, it's on with the sort of continuation. It comes through and down till it finds support, and then once it sort of finds that support and finds that it's sort of, you know, you're getting a sort of bit more of a corrective move, and you're seeing that it's okay, now it's going to start to come up, it'll find resistance, and then it puts in that sort of higher low, then you're seeing a start of a shift. And this is what I was mentioning earlier. This is the early sign of a change of trend, because this is the first part of the sort of change. Comes back up. Now the sellers have overcome the buyers. The buyers have overcome the sellers. They come back up here. They retest this line. And if they can push through and overcome, then you're getting that same price action that we saw this, but just going in the opposite direction. And this is when we're starting to get long on these positions. So yeah, that's just a couple of views for the week. I will sort of be putting out a video on the Wednesday as well. You can always sort of just have a look at sort of what I'm trading through the week. If you do follow me on Twitter, it's YB86 at Risk Bandit. I'm always sort of putting up my sort of charts and thoughts and that throughout the week. But yeah, if you want, throw us a follow on that, and you can sort of always sort of shoot me a message. I'm always happy to sort of talk charts and that as well. All right, guys, good luck for the week.